Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 311. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the sensei of the whatnot, Segulin, the Duke of you-know, but we're also joined on this episode by longtime friend of the show, Freddie E. Williams II, who is the artist on Captain Atom. And we're glad to have him back on the show. We have a really in-depth discussion about his collaborative work with J.T. Cruel on this book. It's always great to have Freddie on to give us some insight into his comic creation and some of his sensibilities on there. I really enjoy chatting with him. So I hope you get as much out of this episode as Jim and I did recording it. We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network and the League of Comic Book Podcasts. Sponsoring us this episode is once again DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. It's actually June 30th and July 1st when I'm doing the recording of this part of the podcast, and I wanted to quickly shout out that this is the time of the month to be heading over to DCBService.com to start seeing what their amazing deals are going to be for next month. I also want to shout out, though, at InStockTrades.com. If you do a search for Freddie Williams, you can find a bunch of his trade paperback collections. His work from Robin, his work from The Flash, and his work from JSA All-Stars are all there and collected. It's a great way to check out his work if you haven't been exposed to it yet. And if you listening to this episode, you can just see why he's an artist you want to check out and see how he puts all of his work together. It's really terrific. I also want to remind everyone to check out at the end of the podcast, we have a very special promo they're going to be playing for an upcoming event at the New York Comic Con. Two of our fellow podcasters are doing something special for the Hero Initiative. It's going to be a weight loss challenge, which is very, very cool. There's some great opportunities for you to participate. You can donate to, even if you're not going to do the weight loss challenge yourself, you can actually donate to help out the Hero Initiative through their cool challenge. I think it's a really cool concept. I'm a big supporter of it. So please check that out at the end of the episode. What kind of a podcast are we?
Raging Bullets is a spoiler podcast. We go in depth in the plot lines, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're discussing on the show. So if you haven't read the books, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
Let's talk some comics.
Green Lantern, let you and I destroy that space junk.
Joining us for this episode to talk about his book, Captain Atom, issue number 10, is longtime friend of the show, Freddie E. Williams II. And Freddie, welcome back to Raging Bullets.
Thanks. And thanks for having me on. It's good to be back on.
We were talking casually before we started recording, and one of the things that I really wanted to address with you, and one of the things I really enjoy about following your work, is the way with each project you really think about the story that's being told and kind of cater that to your artwork. Each book that you've done has been very unique. That goes all the way back to things like Chance of a Lifetime, which I jumped onto late after I became a fan of your work. But it's something I've really enjoyed seeing, from Robin to The Flash to JSA All-Stars to now Captain Atom. Each project's been a little bit different for you. One of our listeners asked this. What have you learned drawing Captain Atom? How has this, as an artist, helped you to grow or learn things about yourself, about storytelling?
That's a really good question. And the stuff I'm learning and have learned on Captain Atom is still pretty new to me. The most simple way that I can describe it is by use of shadows to use abstract negative space. Okay, when I was trying to draw for doing conventions and that sort of thing, to try to get my work, put it into a portfolio so that it could actually be used as an application to work somewhere. I remember hearing artists talk about negative space, but I honestly didn't know what that meant. What negative space was just any place that didn't have detail. So if you had a brick wall and part of it was really black, and then there was part that had, a little bit of rendering, and then there was part that was essentially open, but you still saw the bricks, I thought that area was the negative space. But either the shadow or the light can kind of be negative space. It's essentially, and again, this is like a limitation of my vocabulary. There might be some art major out there who's pulling their hair out going, he's using the wrong terms or something, but I'm learning to stage a scene so that there will be overlapping elements so that if someone's hand is in the foreground, something behind it will create a shadow, or that I can use a spot black behind it so that that hand will then stand out as a shape of a hand. Even if I put no detail on the inside of it, or just a little bit of detail on the inside of the hand, I've used negative space to establish that shape. So I'm using an abstraction to create a hand, kind of, as opposed to the much more typical and traditional comic book style, and the one that I use on a lot, Robin or whatever, is it doesn't really matter kind of what's behind that hand for the most part, as long as there's like a big thick contour line around the hand, then you know it's a hand, you know. It's like here I'm in Captain Atom, I'm trying to use all these, I'm trying to use different staging, superior composition, hopefully, to A, increase storytelling, you know, eye flow and stuff, but B, to also make this abstract kind of style that I'm using, which is heavily based off of David Lloyd's V for Vendetta sort of work. There's some Frank Miller mixed in there, but Frank Miller's too good for me to decipher. That's my honest, that's really the reason I'm not using his work as much as, you know, as an inspiration. But David Lloyd's, it's, for whatever reason, it speaks to me more clearly. It's like 2/3 of the figure doesn't have an outline around it, but still you understand that it's a figure, you know? Those are the things that I've been learning, trying to teach myself, and through trial and error. You know, sometimes I'm just like, no one's going to understand this. I've just got to draw an outline around it. Inking, taking me a lot longer. So anyway, those are the kind of things that I didn't really even know that I would be broaching with this style, but that's what it has taught me over the last year.
One of the things I really love about Captain Atom myself is, you know, you're introducing a lot of high-end concepts here. And it's a character for me, Captain Atom. I shared this with you last time we had you on the show. It's a character that I've had a casual relationship with. I've enjoyed the concept. I've never been a big fan of it. This book has made me a big fan of it because one of the things I'm really enjoying with these high concepts you guys have been introducing in this book, I feel like I'm questioning what I would be like if I had these powers. And I'm always a fan of that in the comic. If you're going to pull me into a comic, I want to feel like on some level I can relate. I can be a part of it. My favorite Superman stories are the same way. Sometimes Superman for me is one of those characters that he's written too distant from me, and I can't relate. I always want him to feel like he's this character that I always, you know, I should aspire to be, but I want to relate to him as well. Captain Atom, since issue 1, I've always felt like I can relate to him. Even though he has these godlike powers that I'll never have, I'm questioning his morality, but then I question my own. Would I handle things the same way that he would? He's been put into some very tough positions. Right to the cancer patient. I never realized that single event was going to be such a pivotal period for him because it sends him on this godlike path. It's something that in issue 10 we're seeing it come full circle, where he's got to go back to that moment and say, this is when it happened for me. This is when I realized I could do these things. I love the morality of the book because I felt like it takes a character who shouldn't be fallible and makes him fallible. And I think it's important when you look at this godlike person, remember, this is a man who's gained these powers. Mentally, he's still one of us, and he's trying to wrap his head around it the whole way. And that's something that I've found charming about this book and this character, is that I've connected with Captain Atom in a way I never did. I'm a fan of this guy because of it. How much of that discussion took place when you guys were creating this character? Like, how did his creation come about? Did you have a hand in that part of it?
Yeah, actually I did. Basically, the entire issues 1 through 10 were laid out by JT and I. He's still clearly the writer, so I'm not taking anything from him. What I'm saying is that he's been open enough to let me throw out ideas, and we go back and forth. He's a very comfortable creator to collaborate with, very open. Ultimately, if he wants to do something, he can do it, but it's just I'm a good sounding board and that sort of thing. But in our initial conversations that we had back a year ago, we laid out this, we didn't know exactly where the issue breaks would be and that sort of thing, but we had issues 1 through what we thought was going to be 12 all planned out, because we thought the story arc would go out to issue 12, and there's a long story as to why it didn't. Is the boy with cancer, is his name Mikey in the comic, or is it Danny?
Mikey, right?
Okay, it was originally the opposite. It was originally Danny or Donnie. It was something like that. It was we had to change his name at the last minute, so I might accidentally. And I feel insensitive calling him the cancer boy. Like, so the boy with cancer. Maybe I'll say that.
Michael Parker's his name.
We knew even before the first issue happened that, like, I mean, and this is spoilers. I know you guys always warn people of that anyway, like at the beginning of your show. But in the first issue, there's a big volcano, and why the hell is this volcano even that big? Because volcanoes develop over time, and we knew that Captain Atom would have led to that. And the same thing with Mikey having cancer. We knew that eventually that he would essentially have... this can get into like a long discussion about morality or what a human might see as a a godly point of view or something, and saying something like, God moves in mysterious ways, that there might be some terrible tragedy that happens, but somehow it equals a greater good if you believe in that sort of thing. For this story, that's kind of what happens here, is that essentially, Mikey not having cancer was much worse in the long run than if he did have cancer, and for several different reasons. But so anyway, that was all. It was all planned out. We, of course, tweaked it along the way, and some specifics changed. Basically, in our initial outlines, we had all that planned out.
With Michael's story, he has to make this decision, and I'm going to jump to this right now just because we're already there. He has to make this decision to say, the end of the world is coming, and I'm the cause of it. And if I keep heading down this godlike path, it's going to lead to this. And he's got to go back, and this is a more mature version of himself, so it's not even the current Captain Atom we've been reading. Yeah. This is a future version of Captain Atom who we're seeing from his point of view. He's got to look back and say, how far back do I go? Do I not have the accident happen? And we get this great sequence of events where he's got to take a look at his entire history. And we'll talk more about that later. But he reaches a point where he has to say with Michael, I have to undo this. Because that was the moment where I realized I could beat anything if I put my mind to it, if I wrap my head around it. If I really know what I'm doing, I can do anything. And that's part of the danger of his power, is the more intelligent he becomes, the more he knows, the more limitless he becomes. And that leads to this path where the Earth's going to be destroyed. The counter that you guys have had there all along was in our face. We didn't know what it was, and that was cool.
There could have been the potential of a thematic problem with having the 20 years in the future Captain Atom kind of come to those realizations, but I felt, because we were worried about that up front, was that the Captain Atom, our Captain Atom from the book, any of them are actually our Captain Atoms. This was kind of like the conversation that JT and I were having, was like, any Captain Atom we say is the name of the book is Captain Atom, all of these are Captain Atom, but there was a potential of having the current Captain Atom not make this decision, and then does it kind of disempower him that it happened from this future version of him or whatever. But I thought it made even more sense because it also gives us a get out of jail free card, kind of. If our current Captain Atom knew of those events, it's going to take him a while to kind of process them, and that's what gets us to the 20-year in the future Captain Atom. And it also gets us the get out of jail free card because we can always say that the morality of the 20-year in the future and then the 500-year in the future and so on Captain Atoms are so much different than our current Captain Atom, and since stuff has been tinkered in the timeline, that maybe Captain Atom wouldn't have even made the same decisions given the new timeline or something like that. So, and this is actually the first conversation I've had with anybody about it since JT and I talked about it months and months and months ago. So it's actually kind of weird to think about this again because it's been so long since we kind of intellectualized this stuff.
You know what question I had about that? Because this is leading me to a visual question, which is right at the beginning of the book. It's one of the reasons why, really, I was very okay with our current Captain Atom, and it's why I am separating them. Did you guys consciously come to the decision, like, with design choices with Captain Atom, you look at the futuristic ones, and the more futuristic that he gets, the more disconnected he seems to look visually with his humanity? Was that a conscious choice to do that? Because I was funny how that affected me in a way where I'm like, this guy would make the decision with the kid. I don't know that our Captain Atom would.
Right. I think arguably our Captain Atom would not have made the decision, even given the facts. As we go further out into the future, Captain Atom's viewpoint and consciousness and how many people he had either seen or caused to die from what he perceived as a cosmic plan or whatever. You know, we didn't write all that. We didn't write every single thing that happens up to the future, but, you know, not for 1,000 years. But he, or it, because he was only a he at the beginning of things, and eventually, in fact, one of my initial pitches was that he would become completely asexual. And I mean, he's kind of going that direction anyway, but where he would have almost a completely neutral sort of shape where you weren't sure if he was a male or a female. Although, on a side note, that'd be really hard to draw on a regular basis because he would look weird. Because you, as an artist, you want to draw things that make sense to the reader upon initial looking at. But we got really deep into the psychology of where these changes would come from, why we would have these changes. Originally, we were possibly going to have hundreds of Captain Atoms where they were going to be popping up out of the time stream because as things started to, like, we could even consider it like a time quake or something where, of course, we didn't use these ideas, but that other Captain Atoms would essentially sense a disturbance in the Force and pop up like, what's going on, guys? So we were talking about a long list of sort of, I have like a notepad program on my computer that, just has like these little floating notes that you can put anywhere on your desktop. Every time I had an idea of what kind of a version that we could make, I kept noting it down. So there's a long list of things that we didn't have room to do.
You answered a lot of questions about the design choices for the future of the character. The current look, though, the present-day look, was that something... I know that DC had a lot of concept art from the get-go with a lot of characters. Were you given the concept design for Captain Atom, or was that something that you guys were able to come up with and tweak? Or how did all that work? Because I'm always interested, because his look is very new and unique to Captain Atom.
Let's see, and you're correct. Yeah, most of the designs for the New 52 were done by Cully Hamner and Jim Lee, but there was some other stuff, more peripheral, to be honest. Less A-list characters, less iconic characters that were left in the hands of whoever was going to be drawing the book, and that includes Captain Atom. It wasn't presented to me like that. It was presented to me like it was a really good, like a compliment to my design skill or something, that I was going to get to design it. Because, look, Jim Lee and Cully Hamner are doing these, but you get to do this one. And let's see, JT and I, before I did any visual stuff, me and JT, and I think maybe even Rachel Gluckstern, our editor at the time, were all involved in an hour and a half or 2 hour long brainstorming session before anything started, where we just all talked about what our initial ideas would be for the series. And in that conversation, that's when Rachel told me that I should start thinking of a new design for Captain Atom. And we had a bunch of different ideas. One idea was that he would look like, if you shook up a lava lamp, like all those little bits floating around in it and stuff, that he would look like that, like a container with all these things floating around in him. And that lasted for about 2 seconds until I realized how complex that would be to draw and make it make sense. Because imagine if I show a close-up of his face, and in his face there's all these weird bubbles, you'd probably still understand his face. But then if I show like a medium close-up where his hand's out in front of him, like the bubbles in that are going to compete with the bubbles behind him and his own eyes behind his hand and stuff. So we ruled that out. I thought initially maybe he would essentially be, you remember the character Sunspot from the X-Men lore? He was in New Mutants and stuff for a while. He was all completely just a silhouette with Kirby crackles around him. I thought about doing the opposite of that, where he was basically a glowing white silhouette, that walked around and all you'd see is the symbol. So there was quite a few iterations of other stuff. There was also stuff where I tried to go even more into like some other sort of religious iconography sort of stuff, but we eventually settled on basically a Ken doll. And to me, it was always like, Captain Atom could actually make his body look like anything he wanted to, but this was his subconscious level of what his body was, which was he has individual fingers, but not individual toes, because he didn't, most people don't see their own toes that often. They just see them in socks and shoes. So he'd picture it like that. Obviously, he's not a very sexual person, or he kind of sort of is, but he's basically like a Ken doll down there. So there was a lot of thinking into what was essentially a relatively simple looking design. The only input I had him with not... Technically, his hair is like energy kind of steaming off his head in the comic, and that was not my original idea. That was an input from Jim Lee, and he requested that. And I'm cool with it. It actually adds a little bit more motion to his body, which he needs because he doesn't have a cape or anything. So, but that was basically the process. I redesigned the atomic symbol, where I took the original atomic symbol and I mixed it with like a crucifix. And then that's what added the new symbol. And I wrote like this character sheet thing that was describing how I wanted to draw him. And I think I put on there something like an atomic messiah, because, the atom symbol plus a cross equals an atomic messiah. It wasn't a real long process, but I did it was a pretty creative. That was actually probably the most fun, was establishing, because I've had fun over the series, but it was the most fun when I was trying to come up with what am I going to do with this series, and those things that felt very spontaneous and new as I was thinking of them. That's probably the most fun, because and we could do this, and I can do this with the character, and I can do this with the style, and we can kind of hopefully go crazy on the time travel stuff, and there's just all these new, hopefully cool possibilities.
One of the things that I've really digged about the series, and you can really especially see it in the opening page of issue 10, and it's kind of where you were talking about that negative space. My head, I call it layering, the layered artwork, where it's one panel is doing, showing the expression, the movement through multiple imagery and stuff like that, and it's that flow through where you're seeing the same character multiple spots on the same page, not restricted to like just the traditional panels. And that's something that with the nature of Captain Atom, everything that's going through, that's something I've really enjoyed and felt really fit the book. When you guys were laying out the game plan, were you throwing this stuff out there, or was this something that as you started the sketching, as you started the creating, going, hey, let me try this, hey, what do you think of this, or how did that, I want to know how that came about?
The kind of experimental sort of storytelling in Captain Atom, what facilitated that, although it wasn't intentional at the time, one of the big facilitators for that was going into the time stream. Once they were into the time stream, we had a feeling that gravity only worked in the way that the Captain Atoms would want it to work, or it's not that there was no gravity, but it would be like they would will themselves, if they wanted to stand on a wave or stand above the wave, or since the wave was undulating, maybe there was like localized gravity, so you would see some of them essentially upside down and some of them sideways. The time stream was like, there was a realization at some point, and I think JT might have brought it up to me actually, if you ever wanted to do crazy panel layouts, this would definitely be the time to do it, because we're in a place that's kind of nonsensical. Like if they were in a crazy place, like a dimension that gravity worked weird, but there was like a whole bunch of background stuff, it might be harder to show. It'd be harder to make sense of it. But here, essentially, there was just like, a couple of waves here and there that I could throw in the background. So feel free to make people upside down to guide the reader's eye in a way that I've never done before and stuff. So that's kind of what brought that about, was just because the time stream area was so unusual that it afforded me a lot of unusual storytelling opportunities. Aside from that, though, just as a artistic growth, I've been trying to, even in the non-Captain Atom stuff that I've drawn in the last year or whatever, I've tried to get more dynamic with my layouts, even in a background that has regular gravity and supposed to be the real world and that sort of thing. Just where I'm trying to pump up the drama, not the volume. I know what you were going to say, Jim. No, but pump up the drama where I've got much bigger elements versus a much smaller element. So the way that if you listen to music, you get a crescendo is if you start small and quiet and then you escalate and graduate to something big and loud. If everything is too loud throughout the whole song, nothing sounds loud, or if it's too soft, nothing sounds soft. So you have to have that contrast, basically. And so, and I've been trying to do this in everything, and will continue to try to do this, even if it's not Captain Atom, just trying to punch up the contrast where on the page I have a wider variety of sizes and shapes, and try to pick, if it's appropriate, unusual camera angles and weirdly shaped panels sometimes. So it's a combination of the time stream and also just me trying to grow as a storyteller.
When I was reading this, and I know Sean did this as well, and probably most of the readers, you do ask that question of what would I do if I had these godlike powers? When you were drawing this and dealing with the creation of this, did you guys get into conversations like that where you started thinking, okay, what would I do if I was Captain Atom? How would I handle this?
That is a very logical question to ask. I'll rephrase the question that we were asking. It was more like, how can we draw a distinction between what Captain Atom will do and what Dr. Manhattan did? Because if anyone is unaware of it, Captain Atom was the inspiration for Dr. Manhattan, but Dr. Manhattan was handled so well by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons that he eclipsed Dr. Manhattan, now eclipsed his origins, which was Captain Atom. So there's in any review that I've seen of Captain Atom, whether it be favorable or not, and most of them have actually been favorable, there's always a throwaway line, at least a throwaway line, about how Captain Atom was the origin for Dr. Manhattan and how this then seems like he's been re-influenced by Dr. Manhattan. And there's definitely some sense to that. I mean, there's some truth to that this is being re-influenced by Dr. Manhattan, but we didn't want to go the same route, or if we did, we wanted to get there a different way. The distinction that we made intellectually with Dr. Manhattan versus Captain Atom was that Dr. Manhattan is a scientist, so his brain he would look at things in a different way. He would even reconstruct himself after a teleportation or after he was, essentially disintegrated for the first time. He would reconstruct himself in a way that a scientist would think of anatomy or physiology or whatever, and that Captain Atom thinks of it more as a layman, or in pilots' terms. Now, pilots aren't exactly laymen, but they're not going to, they're going to think about things much more, I think, in a standard sort of thought process. They're not going to look at it like a scientist would. So we often thought about that, like to make sure that we're not trying to cover the same ground that Dr. Manhattan already had, or if we do, to make sure we do it in a way that's unique to Captain Atom and doesn't just seem like we're rehashing the same thing. Another variance on that question is Denny O'Neil was describing that he would much rather write a story about Batman than he would about Superman, because with Superman he just has so much power that it's hard to find a challenge for him. That's kind of that same question that we had to ask ourselves with Captain Atom, is like, what would be the challenges for this guy? So it's kind of along the same lines as what you asked, though.
One of the things that I really enjoyed about what you were talking about is, as a reader, Jim's right. I did say to myself, what would I do if I had these godlike powers? But I was thinking of myself as different than Captain Atom. The sense that I was recognizing that Nathaniel was under there. And that's one of the things that I've really loved as far as a balance of this book, because this is really hard to do when you do a character like Captain Atom with this kind of power and all that, is helping us to remember the man underneath. And I love storytelling-wise how we've gotten along the way reminders of his origin, his life beforehand, as he's tried to reconnect with it. It's almost like he's been grasping at it so he doesn't lose it, which is, I think, that contrast was really drastically important when you get to issue 10 and see what's happening to this man many, many years down the road as he's losing more and more connection with his humanity. Then he becomes this Chronomoda. I think that is because of the loss of, at least as a reader, it felt like to me, like it's because of his loss of humanity. More and more he was losing that along the way, and he became this blob of goo because he couldn't reconnect with that anymore. Which I'm like sitting here, I'm getting this. I see what can happen to this guy. And I could see how that would be a real huge danger, especially when you're talking about like he's like a Ken doll. Human interaction for him, even getting close to somebody, burns somebody's hand off. What would that do to your psyche? What would that do to your connection to the race? And we've seen parts in this story where he's clutching onto humanity, and also parts in this story where he's been coming to terms with his distance from humanity. Such an interesting contrast for the character. I don't know that I would have always reacted the way that he did. And I like that this story makes me think beyond the book and makes me realize that he is a different sort of human being, because I don't have his background. I won't be that guy. So I would, because of my own personal background and who I am, I would handle it differently. Jim would handle it differently. You would handle it differently. And I think as creators, it was important for you guys to think about how Nathaniel would handle it, so that way we feel that way.
Yeah, and something that goes to that is, I think it happened in issue 7. JT introduced with I had no input on this. He just introduced it in the script, which I thought was really good, which was showing that that Nathaniel rather had a theme throughout his life of essentially just hold on and ride it out, or just hold on and essentially keep a grip on the situation, like don't give up. And so there's like this page that it shows, throughout the book, throughout that issue, we see different times that it isn't even the center or the focus of the panel, but it shows him holding on or gripping something. But then there's this page that shows like 5 or 6 panels where he's like gripping the joystick or whatever it's called of the F-14 that he was flying, and then there's another shot of him as a child holding on to his steering wheels, or the steering wheel. What is it called? Handlebars. There we go. Not the steering wheel. The handlebars of the bike as he's learning how to ride it, and him as a pallbearer holding onto the handle of his father's casket, and then finally of him holding onto the controls of the little scientific experiment ship that eventually gives him his powers. I really like that as an emotional kind of connection to that is what Nathaniel's. If you could try to make a visual correlation to what his personality is, that would be kind of it. And I think JT did a really good job with that connection. And you're right. I think if I had the powers that Captain Atom has, almost right away, I think I would be like that atomic gorilla on page 6 or 7 or whatever it is that has essentially slaughtered all of the Justice League and who knows what else that crazy guy is going to be doing. That was a really fun thing to draw, by the way, because I love the idea of like this, essentially like Magala had, and the story that's not being told here, Magala must have, he couldn't find a human to take the risk of the Captain Atom or the atomic experiment, so instead he put a gorilla through it. And it emerged and just went crazy.
See, I was thinking maybe it was Gorilla Grodd or something like that. Because as soon as I saw Flash there, then the whole Justice League, I was like, I wonder if he went to Gorilla Grodd or...
Gorilla Grodd just acted really stupid and somehow maneuvered himself to be the one who had the experiment done on him. That's a funny thought to have. But no, it's just mostly is just supposed to be like a random test subject gorilla, like Planet of the Apes sort of gorilla who was stuck in the device, and then he was taught to hit certain buttons, and then it went crazy and he emerged.
What was interesting about that is I connected to that rat when Captain Atom had that issue with the rat where he had to face that, and just the intense decision he had to make there with how to bring the rat back down. But I'm thinking also, okay, that was a rat, and the intelligence difference between a rat and a gorilla is going to be huge.
I let me say now publicly that I think JT must have made a mistake by making that first story arc have a rat in it. We should have had the gorilla. I'm in love with the idea of the atomic gorilla. That to me seems like one of the coolest stories we could have told. Like a rampaging atomic gorilla would have been awesome. I'm saying that with a wink and a smile because I think I actually like what JT did. It would be funny to have got to draw that gorilla more.
I think one of the things that I like about that, especially when you're saying with the wink and the smile, though, for every reason you just said about the atomic gorilla and how fun that would be, I think the contrast with the rat as a reader and looking at this going, oh my gosh, look at all the trouble Captain Atom had, and that was with him around with the rat. Mm-hmm. Imagine if it had been a gorilla, and it kind of adds a little power to this moment where you see him with the Justice League going, okay, there's no Captain Atom there to take him out. He is Captain Atom, basically. Yeah. You're right. I would love to see it Elseworlds of like what this story was.
Yeah, it would basically just be 20 pages of slaughter, I think. Slaughter and destruction. But I would love to draw it. So if it happens, if any DC executives are listening to this, sign me up.
I would read that. I really like how you guys handled the older Captain Atom again, because I'm looking at the pages right now where we're seeing him kind of go through the possibilities of where do I stop things? Is it the hand? Is it before then? When do I go through and do that? Because one of the things I found in the earlier issues with him, he immediately felt colder than our Captain Atom, distant, less sensitive, if that makes sense. And when we got to see into his head here, I think it was really important for us to connect with his thought process, and he really is different in how it's clear that he's the same guy from seeing him through this thought process, but something's missing. Something's been lost. There was something about the whole visual with that, looking upon the younger version of himself, that, I don't know, I just really kind of connected with how that was all handled there. Because even the way he was looking at Mikey, the cure and everything like that, it is more detached looking at that moment than the intensity of seeing the younger version of him fighting frantically to try and stop this.
That's definitely the intended vibe, so I'm glad that came off that way. Yeah, I'm flipping through it right now. It's been a little while since I looked at it, but he's more of a spectator. He's getting to see it. He has his own memories of it, but he's getting to see it the second time around as more objectively speaking. And we even used the same staging. A lot of these panels, the compositions lifted directly from the original, including the one where the future Captain Atom sticks his head into a panel that we've seen before where Captain Atom is hovering above Mikey, while Mikey's asleep or whatever, or unconscious, so for the surgery.
I got a question from Adam, one of our listeners. What did you enjoy most about drawing Captain Atom? What's something that's really grabbed you about the process of drawing this book? Is there something that stands out for you?
I think what I was mentioning before about learning how to use negative space and abstraction in a way that I had not thought of it before, and to kind of then understand what other artists had tried to explain to me for 15 years or whatever it's been, and that I thought I understood, but then suddenly I understood it in a different way. That has been a real big discovery and learning process. Also finding a way to kind of sort of hodgepodge the two styles of like a gray wash and then a stark black and white sort of style together. That has been fun, and I feel like it's something that's unique. I don't know 100% sure if nobody else has done that before, but it seemed like something I had not seen before, so I enjoyed that too.
I do like that. A lot of the stuff in the New 52 when those books were launched, there was a lot of them, and Captain Atom is in this category of one of those that just really kind of blew me away with this. There was really a sense of styling to the book and to the story being told. And I'm reading, a lot of comics, not just DC's New 52. I'm reading stuff outside of DC. I'm reading Independence. I'm reading, I like a lot of variety in comic book work. And one of the things I enjoy is unique art and unique presentations. And when I see something like a Captain Atom, it stands out for me because when I read that book, it's something different. It's something I'm getting only in that book. And I think that's really an important thing to remember in comics. These are unique experiences. It's something that you can't get in any other medium because of the fact that there's a creative element to do things that you just can't do. You can't do on the screen the same way that you can do on paper. I don't know. It's something that I just really kind of stood out for me for this book.
Cool. Yeah, and so there was 52 books, and I don't think any of them looked, the way that Captain Atom did, and I was hoping when I was trying to figure out how I was going to draw Captain Atom, one of the conscious decisions when I thought about making the sort of style juxtaposition or, contrast, I logically thought it out that perhaps if this is successful, it'll be because I'm zigging when everyone else is zagging. Because almost every other book, virtually every other book, is drawn in a very image style that maybe was popular in the 90s. Now, I say that with no derogatory overtones because I love image books. I love that style. I'm Jim Lee's biggest fan, and I'll challenge anyone who says otherwise. But so I'm not like putting that down, but I'm just saying that I was hoping that it would stand out. Essentially, if people have got 52 books up on the wall at a retail place, that they'll be like, oh, what's this one? This one, for whatever reason, jumped out at me. But, in some ways it might have been too weird. And for just a second, I'd like to derail whatever it is, kind of like shape the conversation to say, I've gotten a lot of emails that were meant to be supportive and that I'll say thank you for. Basically, there were words of encouragement saying, I'm so sorry to hear about Captain Atom being canceled, that issue 12 will be the last. Well, issue 0, I guess, will be the last one, but they really wish that it stayed around. And sometimes I would get a subtext as if they felt like DC just wasn't giving it a shot. And that's incorrect. I mean, I appreciate the words of support, but when the first waves of cancellations were announced, I can't remember what month it was, but it was after like issue 4 or 5 or something like that had come out of Captain Atom. Captain Atom was selling worse than, if you just go by numbers, selling worse than a couple of the books that did get canceled. And there was a lot of people asking, why isn't Captain Atom being canceled as well? And I think there was even a second wave, there was a second place where they could have been canceled, at least that I was told by DC. I don't know if this thing was ever announced or whatever. Both of those times, essentially, the book was protected by people at DC, and I know a couple of them, but I don't know all who had this decision, who wanted to give it a shot because they liked what JT and I were doing, and they liked that the book was something different, and they were hoping that it would find an audience, and the sales just weren't strong enough to maintain that support. You know what I mean? So what I'm saying is thank you for everyone who did and continues to give the book a shot, but I don't fault DC at all. Like, I feel very fortunate that they gave us that many more months, essentially another 6 months, to try to find legs for the book. We just didn't find them. I feel disappointed that we didn't bring in better numbers or something, but there's a long list of reasons that, maybe the book numbers were low. But in any case, I just wanted to bring that up. And I don't know if anybody at DC will hear that or not. I just want to make it clear kind of that they did us a favor by trying to give the book a chance to find a home. You know what I mean?
I was a big fan of the book Manhunter, and DC kept giving that book a shot as well for, I think, similar reasons to what you're addressing right now. Because it was different, it was, great art, great story, unique characters, and I'm a big fan of that. This is one of the things, this is one of those runs that when it's done, I will remember this run, I will reread this run, because it's unique, it's something different, it fills something. And I think it's important in comics for it to continue to be experimental like this. You know, to push new boundaries, because who knows where, with what you guys have done with Captain Atom, where this will influence trying something trendy in a different kind of book, trying something new. I don't know if trendy is the right word, but, you know, just trying something new, trying to explore different boundaries of where comics can go. Because I think that, to me, to keep drawing people to comics over the tons of competition that comics have in media nowadays, I think in order to do that, you have to, you know, change things up, set the bar higher, try new tricks, show us new things that were... I've been reading comics since I was a little kid, nonstop. And the reason why is because of stuff like this. Ooh, wow, that is cool. You know what I mean? And I mean, I still love that 41 now, and I still get that feeling. It's a compliment to the people working in this medium. The fact that you guys can put together books like this and make me go, wow, I have not seen that before. That's a really cool way or a cool take on a concept or an idea, and make me just think a little differently about comics and then the way stories can be told in this medium.
I appreciate you including me or including Captain Atom in that group of books or whatever. And I agree with you that the medium of comics needs to continue to experiment from a realistic or logistical standpoint, from, you know, DC Comics or Marvel Comics sort of standpoint. They need to keep going out on a ledge, or let me use on a limb, you know, but if they go too far, it can break. So it's good to occasionally test the waters and see how much further they can kind of push things and see if it'll, you know, if there's an audience for it or something. And I agree with you. The reason that I'm still interested in comics, I mean, the part of it is an emotional connection that was established very early on in my psyche, you know, as a kid, and I continue to stimulate that as I read more comics and draw comics and stuff. But it's also to see what kind of other subject matter can be broached. I love superheroes punching each other in the face and being muscular and cool looking, hopefully. But I want to see them kind of go through weird... I don't want it to always be the same sort of problems or whatever that they have always gone through for the, you know, since 1939. I don't want to see the exact same problems rehashed. But when DC and Marvel sometimes go out on that limb, people don't buy it, so then it makes them pull back and go, let's be safe again. You know, I watch its development with great interest, though.
You need the variety. You know, one of the terms I throw around a lot of times is the palate cleanser. You need that little something different that's gonna, you know, and I don't want to say break up the monotony, because comic books aren't monotony. They're fun. It's an enjoyable hobby, and I enjoy reading it. But I do need that separation. I'm a Superman guy. I love the dun 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 moments, but Captain Atom gave me these really cool and. I was getting the second, third read-throughs where the detailed thought was coming. You know, I naturally now read them multiple times just to get the overall view of it. But it's with this one, by the second and third read-through, I really started just delving into just, you know, putting myself into his place and see where I would go with it, what I would do with it. Could I handle this type of power? And I usually always say no, because I know me well enough. I abuse it. But I'm totally the evil, power-hungry, godlike creature who would destroy the universe in a heartbeat just to see if I could recreate it. That's my mindset. I'll be like, yeah, I can do this. I'm like godlike power. I can recreate it.
Oh my gosh! Remind me not to give you godlike power at any time soon. You know.
Wait, forget that. I know I'm shooting him if he gets godlike power. And Jim, you're
the first one I take out, Sean.
Yeah. Jim, you're like family, buddy, but you're roadkill as soon as you get godlike power.
Be like that episode. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but the 2-part episode in Star Trek, the original series, where there's an episode where Captain Kirk ends up on a planet where he sees his own tombstone and it says James R. Kirk instead of James T. Kirk, and it's like a guy who's not the Q, but he's kind of like the Q before the Q came around, and he's able to like kill him by hitting him over the head with a rock. Like apparently there's this godlike entity that can be killed by getting hit over the head with a rock by James T. Kirk. That to me is a really funny, like, what? So like you'll be shooting Jim after he's got the godlike powers to stop him, but he's already got the godlike powers.
I
that
love
actually character. Hold on, that character was a Q. They in the Star Trek book universe, they went to that character, and that was a child Q. So that
Are you serious?
Yeah, and it was this really cool book.
So they retconned it.
Yeah, they retconned it, completely pulled that into the regular universe because that character, that creature, entity, had kind of started growing up, and Q went to Picard for help because Q is the godfather / father / uncle of that creature, and he was trying to control him, and he couldn't. So he goes to Picard for help because Picard's dealt with him so many times. It was a really cool book, and I can't remember the name of the book now. It's going to drive me nuts. Right now, my brother is yelling at his iPod, going, he's rattling off the episode and what the character's name was in the book as well. So I'll get a text from my brother Bill as to what this is, and but yeah, I know exactly who you're talking about, and yeah, that was a really cool usage in the book universe of Star Trek.
I'll have to step away for a couple seconds. I'm trying to find the right convention bag that'll let me carry a rock with me, just in case. I love that we turned into that Star Trek tangent out there somewhere.
Yeah, you never know. If you have to take out a godling, just a big rock just right across his head.
It's funny. Speaking of godlings, I'm looking at the future Captain Atom, the one with the 3 faces.
Uh-huh.
Was the intention with him, because I really like this, where he says see, know, and feel, was the intention with him that he's so separated from his humanity at that point that's him putting, each face is a different aspect of his personality or of the way he's thinking?
I honestly don't know about that specifically. What it boiled down to was when we were talking about all the different ideas for what the future Captain Atoms could look like. And I had that notepad that had a whole long list of stuff. And then JT had some ideas as well. That when we compared notes, we both had in our notes a Vishnu / Shiva, I don't know how to pronounce it, looking, or, that was the note that we had that we wanted to make Captain Atom kind of look like that. And so we were like, if both of us had that thought, let's use that. So it wasn't as deep probably as you're giving it credit for. It was just because we thought it made a good visual that he would have. Or on the other side, maybe as time is going on, Captain Atom is looking, I was about to say at different mythologies, but at perhaps different religious iconography is probably what I should be saying, to be inspired by, or that subconsciously something that he heard when he was 12, could lead him to a different sort of knowledge set that would eventually influence what he looked like or something. I'm not exactly, to be honest, I'm not really sure what the idea that JT had. I just thought it would make a cool visual and it would look godly. I
actually really liked the different looks as he got more futuristic because, we wind up, I jokingly say that blob of goo with the chronomoda at the end, but really I guess how I took it as it really was just this deeper and deeper disconnection from humanity that made him less human. He's reforming himself in these shapes that are kind of matching his mental state at that time. And when I saw that, I'm kind of like, wow, this is, this 3-headed dude is really one who no longer associates with our concept of one personality making up the whole person. It's really maybe separating those different feelings or ideas. I don't know. It really was. And I do that a lot of times too. I'm well aware that there's a lot in comics where I will think beyond the page. And I think there's a certain point to the artistry of comics doing that. I don't want everything spelled out. I want concepts to be laid out a lot of times where I can do that. Because that's to me the increased value and the increased enjoyment of it is sometimes okay, let's lay this out there and let the reader go where they do with it. And I'm a fan of that. I don't need it all spelled out. And this is something about when I was looking at that image, it just kind of struck me now. I'm like, well, I wonder. Because that's where my head's at.
Yeah, let's go with that. It sounds better than me saying, it kind of look cool. We'll go with what you said. Actually, I'm not 100% sure on what JT thought. He might have actually thought that, and now that I'm thinking of it, as we call him the angelic Captain Atom, the one that doesn't have a mouth and who communicates telepathically, he even said, upon their first meeting, something about that they're of one mind or something, that they're all communicating telepathically or something. And so I guess we could even say thematically him developing three faces is like a precursor to him no longer identifying with individuality. I'm not exactly sure, and I was just going for a visual.
I'm going to screw this up, but it's funny when you're talking about him with talking telepathically. I know there was a mention from him, or it was one of the other Captain Atoms explaining him, that he doesn't speak anymore because either there's no reason to, or he's forgotten or not bothered with retaining the ability to, or the reasoning to speak, because there's nobody to talk to. He doesn't have those type of dialogues anymore because he can speak telepathically, which I really liked that too, because I felt like as we got to know each one of them, because we've only got so much time with each one, but I felt like there was this real sense of each one being a certain progression to Chronomota, versus us saying you're eventually going to become Chronomota and not really seeing that like there was a journey to that. I liked the way you guys handled this, because you don't have a lot of time to flesh them out. And there's no reason to, because that's not the point. The point of them being there is to show this sort of quick timeline of he went on a journey to wind up to be this thing. And I think if you had just done it, our Captain Atom and the other one, the 20-year version, the one that's a little bit more like ours, I think it wouldn't have had that powerful an effect for me. I really liked that you put other ones in there to give this sense of a journey. It was something that I just really appreciated. So that's why I keep going back to these guys, because I really liked the choice to go that route. It gave me a greater sense of that. And so it was a good decision you guys made.
Cool. Thematically, we thought that the progression, the Vishnu Captain Atom has like kind of a robe, an energy robe below his waist. But then whenever we get to the angelic Captain Atom, who's older or from the future, more in the future, it's like he's got energy wings and the bottom part of him is starting to turn into a cloud, and his hair is kind of like a cloud or something. And then if we go way further in the future, then Chronomota is a cloud. He was essentially dissolving. That's how I was picturing it. The angelic Captain Atom even has like his sleeves are kind of energy wafting sleeves or something like that. So that was the idea visually, at least.
As our Captain Atom's absorbing the other guys, we're seeing what's happened because of his power that he got from the situation with Mikey, and just gradually after that fixing Renita's hand and seeing where all that goes with her. We're seeing a guy now who doesn't feel that he has any limitations at all. So when these two are attacking him, he's just saying, okay, we're in this together. Let me just absorb you, use your energy, because I'm going to go up against Chronomota, and we're going to do it together whether you like it or not. Which was an interesting choice, and I loved this because, and I'm complimenting the story for this, because it was something I didn't expect. The 20-year guy is the one that we're listening to him be rational about all this, because he's watching what's happening with our less experienced guy. And this is the point where he's saying to himself, look at what he's doing with this power. He keeps absorbing more and more power. And it's this type of mentality that I can do anything. There's nothing that can overcome me. Even this futuristic blob version of myself that has so much experience, so much power, I am going to absorb and take in anything that I can to beat that. He's, in the past, looking at what's happening with this cancer thing and realizing that, wow, it was this moment where we did this to ourselves, where we started believing that we could do anything and stopped connecting with ramifications of what we're doing. Not just the short-term fix, but the long-term ramifications that having godlike power can have. That sometimes there needs to be things that just can't be fixed. And there should be things that just can't be fixed, so we learn how to adapt and as people. I loved that whole. I like this issue. Just really blew me away with how much I was really thinking about afterwards. This 20-year guy who, went on the first meeting with him, I wanted our Captain Atom to have a smackdown with him because he was being a little rude. Because I was a big fan of the relationship with Renita, so when he was being so cold about it, I'm like, okay, go smack this dude around. I don't care if he's you. I love that by the end of his story, I found him very endearing because of that.
Oh, cool. Yeah. And that's, I think your description of the lesson that he had to learn is right on the mark. That was the importance of it. And I can't believe you wanted to smack him around. He's so cute. I drew him. He kind of has the shape of a Ninja Turtle, or aside from that, he's supposed to be in my written description of him was that he's supposed to be Gandhi-esque. Now, of course, his personality is not, very Gandhi-like. Yeah, he's supposed to be like this thin, non-battle ready, slightly alien type guy or something. But
it is Gandhi-esque, though. When you get there, like at this point, I see him that way. On the first meeting, because the first meeting was very abrupt for Nathaniel. So we're seeing him interrupt something that we as readers all want to see. You can't help but root for the guy. You want him. It's the comic book fans thing. You want the guy to get with the girl because we as comic fans a lot of times don't have that privilege. Yeah. So I mean, when I think there's a natural cheering section for any guy in any comic who's like trying to get the girl that is unattainable. So he's getting that with Renita. And we're in that moment, and all of a sudden, older him comes and like gets in his way. So like you want to smack him around, but now when you see him in this moment, the Gandhi-esque thing that you're talking about is so totally there. Which is, I'm being honest about my journey with him. It was really funny how at first I started with this, let's get out of the way. What are you doing to your, you should know better than to do this to him. And then at this point, wow, I totally get why. That was not something important to him at that moment.
Yeah, it's also kind of has that Big Brother sort of feel of the Big Brother getting in the way of stuff. It's himself, but that's kind of there too.
Magala. We had this thing, it's not just with the issue continue on, I think just in general. I want to talk about him for a little bit because you see a guy in this position where he's in the wheelchair and he needs so much to be able to function. He's given the opportunity earlier on in the series with Captain Atom where Captain Atom comes to him and says, hey, I can fix you. No, now I can do this. What do you want me to do for you? And Magala's basically, no, I've got everything I want. I am who I want to be. And I love how that's something that Nathaniel naturally assumes that everybody needs to be fixed, but Magala's at peace with who he is. Who he is really lets him be the guy that he wants to be, the inventor, the scientist, in many levels, the mad scientist that we know him to be in the series. But I loved the power of that moment where he didn't just take the easy way out, and that you guys explored the rationalization as to why he would not want that, because I felt that was unique and different. And, you talk about how you were talking earlier how you don't want to see the same stories over and over again, and it's fun to push characters and concepts in new directions, too. And I think when you explore things like that and really take a look at a Magala and say, hey, there's an opportunity to tell a story here with a guy that you would think would jump at that chance and not. I think the visual of him, how he looks, so much like, wow, why wouldn't he want that? Because life has got to be so hard for him, because he looks visually like, oh my God, that would be a nightmare, to be in that point. Because he wasn't always like that, at least on the level that he is now. To see that he wouldn't take that gift horse that we all see, I thought that was neat. I thought it was just something different, and it shows how you can't always judge a book by its cover. And I don't know, It was a very short sequence of events, but I thought it was very powerful in this book, the presentation of it. Magala saying no to that.
Yeah, and Magala, we want to approach or deliver unique characterizations. To me, I think of, there's three main characters in the book, which is Captain Atom, Renita, and Magala, and Scott Alexander is kind of like a side. I mean, he's like a supporting role, I guess. But Magala, if he wanted to, and I guess at some point he finds it necessary to in the future, he generates like a mechanical body for himself or something, but all he needs to concern himself with is exploration of the universe using science, scientific trappings, and he doesn't really need much to do that physically, and so that's where his focus always is. And actually that becomes explored more in the last two issues that I'm finishing up the artwork on now.
One of the things that I really like at the end of the issue, and some of this you're probably not going to be able to comment on, because we're left with a cliffhanger here with him creating his nateness at the end. And I know a lot of what I'm going to tell you where my head's at. And I think this is something, it's really for the listeners. And obviously if there's things that you can comment on, feel free. But I'm kind of preferencing this, that I know I'm saying things that you might not want to say anything about now because I'm speculating and we don't want to confirm it.
Okay.
But one of the things that I really like about that sequence is we get him taking a look and saying, I want to be with Renita. And we've seen that since the beginning in his glances, the way that they work together. There's been a sadness to that. and him looking and saying, what if I take all that's human of me and craft this version of myself? And in my mind, there's two things possibly going on here. Either he's taken that out of himself and made it into, and he no longer has it, and he's made it into this guy, or he's crafted this being that he's eventually not going to be able to control because it's so well crafted. And he's going to have issues with this Nateness because maybe he's not as Nate as Nate thinks. And I don't know, because it's one of the things that I really loved about this cliffhanger at the end. Whether I'm right or wrong on that's irrelevant. The reason why I point this out, this is what grabs me about this comic, and it's what I like about comics in general. It's when you craft something like this where I care enough to speculate. You know, it's not I just read the pages and I walk away. It's I'm thinking about Nateness. You know, I want to know, what does that mean? You know, what does this guy mean? What is he going to do? Whether I'm right or totally off the mark is irrelevant. It's that the story makes me care, makes me want to do that. And that's something about this book that I've really enjoyed. I find that each issue, there's been those moments where I'm thinking, where is this going to go? What's going to happen with it? What does that mean for the character? I love that we get to see this moment that we think we want to see. And even it says at the end, next issue, careful what you wish for. Because what is that going to mean for Captain Atom watching this person sort of be him? How does that affect Scott? And how does that affect Renita? It's just something cool. I just really enjoyed that moment. And I wanted to note it. I want to make sure I didn't skip noting it in our discussions here. And I know I'm throwing something out that we can't go too crazy with because it's a cliffhanger, but I think it's an important part of the issue that should be noted for anybody listening. If you're not reading this book, these are the types of moments that you get in Captain Atom. I know there's a listening audience that listens to our show, and they like to listen to commentary on the issues with the depth because maybe they're not reading a book and they're looking for trades, because this is the first trade's coming out in November. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be called Evolution, collecting issues 1 through 7. The way it looks like DC's doing the trade dress. I'm inventing a brand new comic company. It's Treacy's. It's the one that publishes everything that I want them to. And DC's doing pretty aggressive trade dress with the New 52, and it looks like everything's getting traded. I even saw solicitations for books that have been canceled, the second run of the book. So I'm hoping that trend continues, because I think it's really important for creators such as what you guys have done here, you know, when you're getting an opportunity to wrap up a story knowing that it's going to be coming to an end with a certain issue, for readers to be able to know confidently, like, hey, it's worth picking up the trade. I can get a whole story. I can really enjoy seeing a journey with a character in that time frame. But that is coming out in November for anyone who has not been reading Captain Atom. You want to go and read the trade. And I think it's really a great way to read this story, to be able to sit down and read multiple issues together if you have not been enjoying the journey like some of the other readers who picked up Captain Atom right from the beginning, to make sure that you do read the trades of this if you aren't jumping on already, because it's really a terrific book with moments like this where it's like, wow. It's exploring things that you'd say, would I do that in that position? And what would that mean for me? I love that, because you're really going to places that I think anybody would be tempted to go. Whether or not you would succumb to that temptation, I think that's where this book gets really deep. I love that stuff.
Yeah, I definitely can't really go too much into the... I like that you call it the Nateness of being Nate, but thematically, if you have heard about like Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey, which is like basically it's popularized by Star Wars and stuff, but essentially it's about the journey that a typical mythological hero goes on, where they start and where they end, and then kind of like the peaks and low points in between. And the last part of that doesn't always happen in a lot of comic stories or movies. Usually they'll take a 3-act structure from that, but they don't always go for the last 2 or 3 acts or whatever of the hero's journey. But that, to me, is what the last 2 issues are of Captain Atom, issues 11 and 12, which is basically the hero going back home. That's a part of the hero's journey where after it's pretty well exemplified in the last Lord of the Rings movie, Return of the King, whenever the hobbits return to the Shire, and although they have some happiness in their life, there's also their perception of things have changed to such a degree that nothing really seems the same anymore. And that's kind of where this all ends. And I think Captain Atom the Captain Atom series benefits from being read multiple comics or multiple issues being read in one sitting. So I think that the trade will work really well. I would love it if they collected all 12 or 13 issues, I guess, with a 0 and put all of those into one trade. And who knows if they'll ever do that. I don't know. But because I think that even though there's two distinct, actually there's three, basically there's three different arcs. There's like one that's basically 6 issues, one that's 4 issues, and then one that's 2 issues. But there's issue 7 is like a connective issue, and then issues 11 and 12 are, I feel like they still have a character arc in there, and it's still important to Captain Atom, but it's not, Anyway, I just feel like it, viewed in its totality, would probably be best. So I don't know if they'll do that or not, but if I had my say, that's how they would do it. They would just collect all 13 issues together.
But I just got to throw this theory out there, because when Captain Atom creates the Nateness, he comes through. It initially starts off with that red dot on his forehead, and then the energy swirls out, and bam, Nate's there. And when you look at the Gandhi, the alien, I was calling him Gollum, to be honest with you, when I was looking at him. That version, he still has the red dot on his head. So I took it that the reason that creature, that version of him is less human, is because that's what happens to Captain Atom when he gets rid of his humanity, when he creates this Nate. So in a way, we're seeing the birth of the next version of him right here by his creation of Nate.
That's interesting, and it connects to some stuff that JT and I had talked about. I think JT wanted to keep it pretty nebulous as to what the red dot meant. My perception of the red dot, it has changed basically over time. When we first started, the red dot was just actually a part of the character design. It was just Captain Atom was going to have the red dot there. And I looked at it as the dot that's missing in the center of his chest symbol was just put on his forehead. I guess, according to some of my editors or whatever, that there was a couple of character designs that already had a red dot, and they didn't want it to be used too much or something. And so then I wanted the red dot to mean whenever a version of Captain Atom experiences the time stream, the red dot shows up on their head as a symbol of their third eye, their perception of reality being expanded to this point. And then the red dot was kind of like a subconscious, I see things differently. I have a third eye now. And then that even changed to something else, whatever it is now. The reason I say whatever it is now is because JT and I have talked about what it could mean in the script and then over the phone, and where we've basically made it intentionally nebulous. It's not that we don't know, but it could represent 2 or 3 things. And maybe it represents all of those. I don't know, because they're not mutually exclusive. But that's kind of where we're at with it.
It's the whatnot of Captain Atom.
Jeez.
It's that thing. It's that thing he gets.
It's the thing.
Yeah. The thing. That thing.
Exactly.
Here's the one thing I want to add to your theory, Jim, and it's my only thinking on that. The one distinct difference would be, though, he can't really become that same Captain Atom again because so much of his journey was altered by that moment with Mikey not happening.
I would agree with that, but with the caveat that if the dot in his forehead represents humanity or losing humanity or giving up humanity or something, that could still happen in a different way.
Right.
That many roads lead to Rome. So I agree with you. Actually, I think it's good what you said, which is that you're just adding to it. You're not really disagreeing. You're just adding it.
Yeah, well, and I'm not saying that he wouldn't become necessarily that guy, but even that guy is going to be different because his experiences were different. True. So, I mean, it may still be the character point where he's giving up his humanity there. I'm not disputing that. You're right. And you actually explained that perfectly. I'm not disputing it. It's more of a, when you take a pivotal event out of somebody's life like that, they aren't going to be exactly the same person. There's going to be some changes and some variations. Because I think it's interesting. The fact that he went back through time and erased that event in many ways changed his own creation. That guy will no longer be that guy. I mean, that'd be like us sitting here right now and saying, how do I feel about myself right now? Would I go back through time and change something about myself that would dramatically alter who I am now? Even a little bit. You know, I mean, and that's interesting because you might be changing a personality choice about yourself. You might be changing a quirk. You might be changing a way you carry yourself, a way you dress, things like long term. I mean, any little change like that can cause a ripple effect to your future that even if events do play out in a similar way, they're still going to be different because of that change. I love time travel stuff. So I get into like looking at, and you're right, it wasn't disputing what Jim said because I thought that was an interesting theory. It was more of I was thinking through what Jim said, and I'm like, wow, even if he does become that guy, he's still not going to be that guy.
Right.
You know, the whatnot. Just because of that event changing. He would still be slightly different or dramatically different, who knows, depending on where that journey took him. It opens the road up to be different.
Very true, yeah.
Something that just kind of popped in my head now, and seeing this Nate and Renita getting along so well.
Nateness.
Yeah, the Nateness getting along so well. The kind of comment is like, yeah, they seem to be enjoying themselves, good for them. Well, what happens if it goes beyond just enjoying themselves? What if they really start enjoying themselves? They start falling for each other, start having a relationship. So here's this guy sitting back who he wants her, so he creates this creation of himself to have a relationship with her, but he's got to sit back and watch that relationship that he can't have happen. That, for me, I think that would kill me. That right there would drive me over the edge.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about like Star Trek stuff, okay, you know how on the transporter pad you are teleported or transported from one location to the other. All right, well, does that create a prestige-like clone of yourself that then one is actually disintegrated and then a replica of you is created, like the transporter accident where Riker is on a planet that has atmospheric disturbance or force field or something, and one is beamed up, but then the transporter beam is bounced off of the shielding and he rematerializes down below, if you guys know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
And so there's
Thomas.
that he's been on the planet trapped for however long. Or even if in Invincible, the character Robot, I don't know if you guys read that or whatever or have, but when it starts off, Robot think he might actually be really a robot because he's called that, but then you learn that he's being controlled by radio or something like that, like a remote control, by this hideous looking thing in a jar, like this really deformed looking guy. It's a person who is much worse off than Magala and very smart and stuff, and he finds a way, he takes a genetic sample from another character and makes a clone body of that character, essentially duplicates his intelligence into this normal-looking person. And there's this scene that I love that Kirkman wrote where it's like the crazy mutilated-looking version of Robot, the guy who controlled it, is looking up at his newly human-created clone counterpart and is like, he's kind of pleading with him and basically says, remember our agreement, which basically whenever we get the new body, you have to kill this hideous form. So he's basically saying, like, you have to kill me because that was our agreement. I don't want to live like this anymore. That was the whole purpose of us doing this. And there was like, anyway, I'm probably butchering because I can't quote it because it's been several years since I've read that, but it's a really good scene and Kirkman's a genius and stuff. What I'm getting at is Captain Atom looking at a duplicate of himself, because there's a difference between experiencing what an extension of yourself gets to experience. So it's like, let's say you put a camera and a listening device and all this stuff and a neurological hookup to a little, robot, and then you send it inside of the Titanic and get to look around and stuff. It's like, it's kind of an extension of your own consciousness. If instead you're just getting to look at it from afar, you're getting to see it like from a third-person perspective, almost like from a news camera or something, you're not involved, you're not connected to it, you're a bystander again. You're still not, it's like a part of you poetically is being attached to and allowed to interact with Renita. We explore which version of those two options it is. Is it where Captain Atom is actually connected to Nate and it gets to experience what Nate is experiencing, or is he instead using Nate as a poetic surrogate who gets to experience those things, but Captain Atom still doesn't get to. And that story, more than anything, was almost completely created by JT. the reason I say that is because, like I said, originally we were going to have the second story arc be 6 issues, and then some stuff happened where it ended up being 4 issues, and they were like, well, what are we going to do for these last 2 issues? And JT called me one day, he was like, what if we did this? And laid out, the whole thing for the last 2 issues, and I was like, okay, like, that sounds great. Like, I didn't have much input on those, so I had input on other stuff, like how we paced it and specifics, but, more than anything else, that one was almost fully formed by JT by himself.
I like the line "good for them," with the emphasis on them.
Yeah,
that's a great job for. I don't know if that's lettering. I'm assuming lettering handles that, the decision for the bold, or if that's in the script. I don't know. I don't know how that works, but I think I like when certain words are chosen to be bold, because it really, again, sent home something. Because, like you're saying, you have 2 issues to develop this afterwards, and it's something we all want to see. Like, how is he going to deal with this relationship with Renita? So I'm glad it's going there, because I want to see some of this. It's the book's ending with issue 12, and as a reader of it who's really invested in these characters, I really want to see, like, okay, how are we going to play with this now? But I love the them, because it's a dun-dun-dun right at the end. I'm like, yeah, right. And that, those little things get me thinking, too. So I really enjoy seeing those techniques used in a comic to kind of emphasize that. Your comments about Invincible were welcome, because I don't think, Jim, I don't think you've read Invincible, have you?
No, I haven't.
Invincible, to me, and this is not in any way to diminish Invincible at all, it's meant as a sincere compliment. I think Invincible's the best modern-day Spider-Man around. The theme of the character and his accessibility, he's like this young kid who's fun, reminds me growing up of what I loved about Spider-Man. So that's my point with that. It's not knocking it. It's he feels like a very today Spider-Man. It invokes the emotion that I remember as a kid when I read books like Marvel Team Up, and just how Spidey was fun, and he felt like a real kid kind of going through these things. That's not knocking Spider-Man at all right now either, but it's just kind of like it's this one contained book that, like, I get that vibe from every month, and that's kind of what Invincible is to me. So I'm a big fan of Invincible.
Yeah, and Kirkman is a very good writer. Corey Walker, which was the first artist, and then Ryan Otley, who took over on issue like 7 or something. Excellent artists, and I don't know any of them personally, but like I know them enough that when I see them at a convention, I can wave and say hi, and they know who I am. And that, to me, I'm honored, forward to. I collect those through the trades as well, and I always look forward to it. I think that's right now the only non-DC book that I'm getting regularly. I pick up stuff wherever I see it if it looks cool, but the stuff that I actually look for and read as often as it comes out or whatever is just Invincible right now, other than the DC stuff.
It's a good choice. It's a terrific book.
Yeah. So Jim, you need to, other than me spoiling something for you about Robot there, I think you should give it a shot if you have the opportunity.
It's one of those books that I've had multiple people tell me that I should read it and I should get it, and mark it down. It's on my list of trades to pick up, but it's just for whenever whenever I had that moment, okay, time to buy some trades, or when I'm at a con, it never just materializes in my hand. So enough people tell me you have to get this, I will eventually get it. I just started reading Sweet Tooth after how many years of Sean telling me, you've got to read this. And I'm like, okay, yes, I see why everyone is raving about it. It's a great... I was sitting there and I had the first 2 trades, and I'm like, I need to get the 3rd trade now. I need to get more.
I actually have a couple questions. One of the things I was thinking about, when you find out the book's going to be canceled, are you guys given enough leeway to come up with an arc where you can wrap it up? Because I've noticed that with the New 52, and I really mean this more as encouraging people to read the trades of some of these books if they've been interested in them, especially Captain Atom. But I'm liking the fact that even those ones that were ending with issue 8, they had a ending to them. It wasn't just a bam in the middle of an arc, book's done. There's an ending that for fans that have been reading it, you feel like, okay, it's clear that the creative teams had a direction plan where they could have gone much, much longer, but at least as a fan, we feel like we've got a satisfying conclusion. Are you guys given enough leeway where you can know, okay, we need an opportunity to wrap this up for the fans to, give them a sense of that this character might be still going on and still doing his own thing and things like that, but a story that we're trying to tell right now has an ending to it? Are you given leeway enough to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it varies from my experience isn't necessarily the same experience as somebody else, but meaning I think in the past it hasn't been the same experience for everyone. Sometimes a book has been, they're already in, the creative team's already in production on the next issue after it's going to be canceled, and then they're like, oh crap, how are we going to shoehorn in an ending on the issue that we thought we were wrapping up and that sort of thing. So I know that has happened. I don't know about for the New 52, but that has happened in the past. For Captain Atom, that's one of the reasons that we had a 2-issue arc at the end, was kind of like a get your affair in orders. Things might end on issue 10. It's like we were very aware early on how bad the numbers were. I shouldn't even say it like that. We were very aware early on how much in danger we were of being canceled, but that they were giving us a shot, not to panic, keep doing what we're doing. They even said stuff like, we like the book so much that's why we're not changing anything about the book. We're not shifting you guys around or bringing in anyone new. We really like the book. But the sales aren't great, and that we can't ignore that forever. So what I'm saying is, yes, we knew in advance there was a possibility it could have been canceled with 10, which is one of the reasons that we took a 6-issue arc and shrunk it to 4 issues, so that the issue 10 was the end of an arc. So there was a possibility it could have ended at 10, and we were at a planning stage where we had to decide then if we were going to go with 10 or 12, if that makes sense. And so then we decided, well, let's just go ahead and shoot for issue 10 as the last of our second story arc. And then by that point, we already knew that it was going to 12. So then JT came up with the 2-issue arc or whatever at the end. So, yeah, so for us, we were given kind of an early warning system, and then several months of actual all but confirmed sort of cancellation news. And for me, it was like we were really hoping that, because there was a time I did not really a competition and not really a contest, but I did a giveaway where me and JT gave away for free the first 6 issues of Captain Atom to a total of 20 different people. We even paid for shipping and stuff just to get the book into the hands of people, because when people wrote reviews, almost across the board, they were positive. But just so few people were giving the book a shot, and especially because I think this book, it's benefited by reading multiple issues. We were just wanting getting people talking about it, so that, and not everybody of the 20 liked the book, even liked the series, but the vast majority did, and we were hoping that would kind of turn if that would be the chance for us to turn the tide, but it didn't work out that way. So anyway, we tried really hard, because JT and I poured a lot of ourselves into this book, and we're, again, appreciative that DC gave us the chance to try to pull it out. We just weren't able to,
One of the reasons why I even brought that up, and I think you're touching on a lot of what I think is really important when you're taking concepts like Captain Atom and putting them out there. If you want people, I think for comic companies, if you want people to be confident in trying cool new books like this, if you let people know and start developing a system where, I know it's frustrating for you as creators, and it's got to be, this question mark looming, is it this issue, is it that issue, is it going to be here, is it going to be there? But at least if you guys have some idea that these possibilities are coming up, you can craft storytelling where there's breaking points, where we as readers can feel confident that, like, hey, if I jump on this series and let's say it goes 12 issues, or it goes 8 issues, or it goes, because some of the books were going 8 issues, and at the end you're going to get an ending, and it seems to be the way the New 52 has been working out, and I think it's important to do this. I think you're going to get more people who are willing to try some series that are outside of their Batmans and their Supermans and things like that they're used to saying, well, this book's we know it's going to keep going on because it's Batman or it's Superman. I think you really need to let people know that, and I think this is an important thing that they've done, because I think this is great with Captain Atom. I feel very satisfied as a reader that, like, wow, I'm going to get an ending. It might not be as long as, I would have loved this book to keep going on and on and on, because I'm really digging it. But I'm going to feel satisfied as a reader that, well, I'm getting an ending of sorts. Where, with any comic book, it's in a comic book world where you feel like the character's going to go on and on and on and keep doing their own things anyway. But at least with the creative that's working on this book right now, that you guys are going to get a chance to tell me a story where you're like, this is where I'd like to leave readers right now if this is as far as we can go. And I think that's really important, because you build a relationship with your audience that I feel like I've got a relationship with this book and these characters, and it's important for me to feel like there's some kind of wrap-up to that for now. even if it's a for now feeling. I think that's really important. So I'm glad they're doing that, because that's cool to me.
Yeah, and I agree. So that it doesn't feel like the rug got pulled out from underneath the series. It actually has some sense to the story and some closure. And I think JT has done a good job of creating that closure, and it still being a relevant story that's not. In other words, it's not just ending because it shouldn't feel like it's ending just because it had to end. It should. I'm hoping that it feels like it's a good emotional, place for it to end, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does. I was ready to shout out amen, because that's what I mean. I think because that's exactly what I look for, because I think not just for me, because obviously, from the show that we do and stuff like that, I tend to really like new concept series, things that I'm not normally interested in before. I like taking risks because I like getting stories that I don't expect. But, obviously when we talk about sales numbers, your characters that are more established are the ones that people tend to jump on first. But I think if you start developing a system like this, where you're making sure creative is in the loop on the direction as far as where the book's going to go and things like that, it will build a confidence that people go, hey, you might not have read this, but you should pick up the trades because, look, they wrapped it up really cool. And if people are doing that more and more in trades, I think it will make them try more of these new concepts when they're coming out in monthly single issues, because they're like, wow, every one of these that I'm reading wraps up. So it's cool that I know if I take this risk, if I try this book and I like it and I stick with it, I'm going to get this feeling with the monthly that I'm getting with the trade. And I think that's really, really important with titles like this, to build that confidence now. Because I don't think people, because of what you said, I don't think people have always had that confidence, because some books are just ended, bam, at a point where it's not that kind of ending, because the creative team was working on 3 or 4 issues down the road, not knowing that it's going to do that. And I think it's important for the creative team. It's also important for the reader, because you're building a relationship there. And I think this book has been really cool because of that, because I do feel like the fans of Captain Atom feel like they've got a relationship with the creative teams and with the book because of that.
And we don't want it. Now, I did not watch the series Lost, but just from what I heard about people's reaction to the finale of it, where it just felt like it didn't come to a good, convenient stopping point or something like that. I mean, I can identify with just other comic books where either things just came to an abrupt end. It didn't seem to make sense. It just had to end that issue. Or there are other TV shows that have done the same thing, where it just wasn't renewed for another season, even though it left off on a cliffhanger or something like that. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy. If there's a melancholy, a feeling of melancholy that the series is ending and stuff, and I'm inking page, I guess 18. I'll be inking through 20 today of issue 12. And then, of course, I'll have issue 0 as well. But, this is basically the last of this series, even though I've got issue 0, but that's a little different just because it's like a prequel kind of. It's a weird feeling. It's like the getting out of high school feeling. It's coming to an end, and you're excited for maybe what's coming after it, but you're also sorry to see it go. And I got to know all these people, so to speak, all of these characters and stuff, so just a weird feeling.
Speaking about that, and I know you mentioned this in our previous conversation, but one of our listeners asked this question. It's a cool one. How did you feel about, and as a creative team, you had this clean slate with Captain Atom. Were you given a set of starting points by editorial, or was this something where you guys were given pretty much so an open-ended thing on this?
Yeah, the only input that I remember getting from DC editorial was that they wanted Captain Atom to be taken to, I'm trying to think of how, they didn't say like the extreme or, but it was like, take him as powerful and do whatever sort of thing you want. Like, they essentially they wanted him to be less generic, that there's been a tendency in the past for, Captain Atom to just be the guy who flies around shooting energy beams, and, if you want to endanger him, then you just have his containment suit breached. It's very conventional, but if you're going to read, basically, this is no slight against any particular creators out there who did this, but there was not as much of a feeling of uniqueness with the character, and so they wanted us to go somewhere interesting with Captain Atom. The only other one was not really a dictate, but just like a suggestion or a hope, was that we would also be able to create a strong supporting cast, so it wasn't just all in Captain Atom's head, because there's a real tendency, if you have a solo title, especially a real powerful guy, that he'll just kind of float around and lament about things. So they wanted to have a supporting cast that mattered to him, could be kind of a real-world anchor point, could also be possibly in danger if that needed to come up. So I think that was about it. And then the rest, the time stream was like the first idea that I had. It's actually a visual metaphor that I was saving. I don't know if I've told you this before. I was saving for a Superman idea that I had that I wanted to eventually tell about. Instead, I suggested it for this, and it worked out pretty well for what we needed to do. That was kind of the origins, or where we started from.
Was that like that bubbling time stream where like he could pick out certain events from life from that time stream because of that?
The bubbling part I'm not sure about, but basically the way I would describe it is if you were able to stand on the ocean and you saw, like it was a turbulent ocean, you could see faraway waves if they were really tall, but you wouldn't necessarily see all the valleys and waves leading up to that event. So if, for example, we were standing on the ocean, we saw this really far away wave, and we'd be like, what's that? Well, that's 9/11. And so we know that that's coming down the road, but we're not sure, because of the bigger waves that are in between it, we're not sure of every single stepping stone that leads to that eventual destination. So it works as a visual metaphor, and it also works as a way to keep your characters approaching omniscience or approaching knowing the future, but without spoiling it for everyone, without it becoming where the automatic thing you should always say is, well, how come he didn't know that was going to happen if he can see into the future? It's a way to explain why he wouldn't know. And also it describes that since people's decisions affect the future, it's also undulating and changing, so the landscape's always changing, and that smaller waves are much more apt to change than the bigger waves. So small events might have changed leading up to 9/11, but the 9/11 event would still happen. And by 9/11, I of course mean a big event, a big emergency, that sort of thing.
Wow, so that's cool. So there's some events that are more malleable than others because of and the wave, the nature of the wave or the ripple would decide on which ones can be changed more easily.
Yeah, it's like there's a lot of momentum behind a big wave, so a lot of things, it would be hard to reverse the direction of the wave. Like there's a lot of energy being put towards it. So I don't want to cross the metaphors too much, but yeah, it's approaching that sort of logic where the smaller waves are much easier to derail, but essentially they mean a lot less in the grand scheme of things. Whether or not you brush your teeth 100 times up and down or 98 times up and down is much easier to change than this other huge event. So that might be the brushing the teeth thing might be a much smaller, and I don't know why that popped into my mind. That's like probably one of the least appealing visual metaphors I could think of, but it's a much smaller event and you could change it much easier, and it's also much less consequential. The bigger events, there's so many things that acted upon the smaller waves leading up to that big event that it's much harder to derail it or to change it or something.
There was another question that we were given, and this one I don't know a whole lot about Eiling's background. I knew of the character, but I didn't know much of his background. John asked, who gets the smiles and thanks for changing Eiling's race? So it was something that he enjoyed in this book was the choices with Eiling's racial background.
I guess it would be me, but it's JT and I both wanted to have a diverse cast of characters, and I also didn't want to just put there's a tendency, I think, for Caucasian creators, which I am one of. Actually, I guess I have a lot of Native American, but whatever, I identify with being Caucasian. There's a tendency to overcompensate sometimes when they're trying to make a multi-ethnic, diverse sort of cast, where they're also afraid to put somebody of a different ethnicity into the role of kind of a villain, because then it might seem like, there's so few minorities in comics, if you put one of them into a villainous role, then you look racist or something. First of all, I can see where Eiling's coming from. We didn't have as much time to kind of explore his psychology, but from the conversations that JT and I were in, if I were in his position, I would probably I don't know if I would react exactly the same way, but I would react very similarly, because you can't have a rogue agent that you have no leverage over to control. If you're a man who is an or an individual who's in power, and your job is to think of those contingencies. So just right on the page, I just drew him as if he was African American, and I made a note of it in the email to Rachel, my editor, and she was like, "That's cool with me." And so that was basically that was about as much thought as I put into it, was that I wanted more ethnicities in here, and I also didn't want to feel derailed by the idea that he's kind of a villain to not have him be a minority. Renita, I think, I'm trying to think if it was mine or JT's. I can't remember whose idea it was, but basically both of us are very open to, we want to have it feel like the real world. And there's, I actually feel weird using the term minorities, because actually the majority of the people I know are non-Caucasian. So whatever. Somebody who's non-white, let me put it like that.
I felt that the characterization of him, yes, he was the antagonist to the hero, but that's something I've enjoyed about this guy, and I've enjoyed about just other military representatives. It does feel very realistic to how we are as a society right now, and how this soldier would look at someone like Captain Atom, would look at him, and just it's just that the outpouring of the fear, and just how are we going to deal with this? What if he goes rogue? We need security measures in place. We need containment, a way to contain him. And that's something I got out of him. It was, you could call him a villain. Yeah, you can call him an antagonist, but it was very realistic to me. And that's something that I kind of liked.
Yeah, and even the two of the four, perhaps, maybe not. Two, I think, from my memory, two of the four pilots that Captain Atom rescues were also African American. In one of the flashbacks, like his little flight crew, one of those guys was African American. I think another one was either supposed. I'm not very good at drawing a wide variety of faces, actually. So one of them, I think, might have also supposed to have been Hispanic or something, but he probably didn't necessarily. Or no, maybe he was supposed to be Italian. I can't remember. See, it's been a while, but in any case, we try to make a diverse group, but not try to draw attention to it, because it's really the only conversation it should really have relevance in is just between me and the writer, or something, just to make a note of it, but don't draw attention. Who cares about it in the actual context of the story? The reader doesn't necessarily need someone to draw their attention to it. That's just how it is. My best friend in high school is African American, Tyrone, who taught me how to draw. Essentially, if I had a mentor, he would be the one. He showed me the How to Draw Comics Marvel Way book, and we worked. We drew together for a couple of years till he graduated and moved to college and stuff. I've dated different ethnicities my whole life or whatever. So to me, and I grew up in a neighborhood where I was whenever I was in second grade, I was the only white kid in school, and it wasn't it wasn't an issue. That's a non-issue to me. You know what I mean?
I like the way you said that. I think it should be natural. You shouldn't feel like you have to balance out heroes, villains, whatever. It should just. If we get to the point where, like you said, you just don't notice anymore, that's really what we should be all shooting for. It should feel real world. That it doesn't matter if you make a hero or a villain or whatever, certain backgrounds, because everybody's in the book anyway. So it's just kind of, in the universe anyway, where it fits naturally, because you can only fit so many people in one book. It was a good question. I didn't know enough about Eiling's background to know how different it was from his background. Yeah,
he was definitely Caucasian in the original, and I'm trying to think, he might have had red hair or something, so he was super Caucasian. No,
dun dun dun.
But he was he had a pipe, I think. He was kind of like a World War II sort of. He was a caricature of a World War II general or something, if I remember correctly. But to be honest, it's been a while. It's been at least 6 months since I saw any of that reference or whatever. So
now, coming up, there's going to be issue 0 of Captain. There's obviously 11 and 12, and then issue 0 of Captain Atom. You're also doing, I saw, and this was on DC's blog. You're doing the artwork on Green Arrow 0?
Yes, I am. Yeah,
that's cool.
Thanks. I just finished the pencils. I'm just doing pencils basically in June and in July. I'm doing 2 books each of those months. So a total of 4 books over 2 months. The Green Arrow Zero, basically I did just the pencils on it so that I could fit it into my normal Captain Atom schedule. Rob Hunter's going to be inking that, and he's a great inker. And it's the first time that I'm working with an inker in like almost a decade. So I'm eager and nervous and excited and apprehensive, and I'm a combination of emotions to see what he comes up with, because I haven't seen any of his inks yet, because I just finished the pencils like earlier this week. He's a very good inker, and he was my first choice, so I have high hopes. And Judd Winnick is writing that, and it's the first time I've had a chance to work with Judd. I haven't been able to collaborate with him as much as I do with JT and stuff, but it's really cool to get to work with him, and I've had a few emails with him, so he's a cool guy, and he's a guy I've wanted to work with for a while.
I'm a huge fan of his previous work on Green Arrow, so I love the fact that he's going to be returning to the character. I was excited for the Zero issues when I saw the solicit, to see him on there, to see you on there. It's something that I'm really excited for in the book. Is it hard as a creator to go from, in the same month you're going to be doing Captain Atom, which you have a whole art concept that you have crafted for Captain Atom, and then to shift gears, because I'm assuming there's, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, there's got to be some overlap on page work, or are you able to do those independently? Like you're jumping from...
No, your assumption is correct. There's overlap, and it is difficult to change. I'm almost changing character. Well, I mean, I'm changing characters literally and physically, or literally and poetically or something. But it's like an actor playing 2 different roles, I think, is a good analogy. But if that's still nebulous, it's just in the morning I'm dressing like I'm gonna be a construction worker, and then at night I'm dressing in a 3-piece suit. You know, it's like a big dichotomy. It's a big separation as far as style and structure of the figures and all this other stuff. Because in Captain Atom, although I've always had kind of exaggerated expressions and that sort of thing, Captain Atom, I feel like it's much less cartoony than Robin was, where, you know, there was youthful characters with big eyes and different type of emotion going on or whatever in the book. And so Green Arrow is more akin to the Robin stuff, although it's still different stylistically, but it's hugely different than Captain Atom, you know. The Captain Atom stuff is more abstract and all this other stuff. So yeah, it is different. And I essentially did like a style sheet for myself on... I've been developing a style sheet for different characters in Captain Atom as I've gone, but before I really got going on Green Arrow, I made a style sheet of what Oliver Queen would look like, how I wanted to draw him, the shape of his face and stuff. And then as I went and drew page 1, the faces that I drew on there I liked, so then I added those to the style sheet. And then I did page 2, and I liked those, so then, you know what I mean, like the first few pages, essentially I established the look, and then I kept reinforcing the style guide, so that while I kept kind of swapping back and forth between the books, I wasn't contaminating one book with the sensibilities of the other, you know.
So you're building that for consistency for yourself then, so that way we as the reader, when we're reading the book, are like, okay, this is Freddie's Green Arrow, this is Freddie's Captain Atom, this is Freddie's Renita, you know, I mean, those type of things. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, you're right on. Yeah, the Captain Atom stuff needs to look completely visually different than the Green Arrow stuff, so I didn't want it to take on a homogenized look where it was like some weird hybrid in between them or something. The approach that I'm taking on Green Arrow, because I'm trying to think of who did the cover, maybe Ivan Rice, or if that's how you pronounce it, for Green Arrow. I could be wrong. In other words, I'm saying none of the artwork for Green Arrow that I've done for issue 0 has been seen yet, but I'm kind of going back to the Robin stuff, but adding a little bit more line art detail. So if there was any one artist that I could say it was more like, be maybe a little bit of an Arthur Adams feel, which I almost feel sacrilegious saying that because he's such an amazing artist, that I'm not saying that I'm as good as that. I'm just saying it has maybe a little bit more of that feel, which is a fair amount of rendering over the top of slightly cartoony, you know, figures and stuff.
See, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying stuff like that, because I think what it is I think as creators, just like we do as fans and readers, you know, over the years we follow certain creators, and they're people who influence you know, the books we jump to, the style of artwork we like, things like that. So for you as a creator to say, I'm thinking mentally of work that I like from this creator, I think you're honoring that creator by mentioning them. And I think that's something that's kind of cool, that I know we as fans kind of connect. Like, I connect with you every time you'll throw out a creator reference because I'm like, oh, cool, this is somebody I like too, and I think that builds kind of a connection between you and your readers as well, knowing that like you're channeling into people that we've all known and loved over the years too. I think that openness that you have is pretty cool.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, and the goal is never to be an ape of that, like to mimic their style. It's just like it's the same thing with Captain Atom. It's like taking elements of David Lloyd's work that I liked, which was the abstraction, heavy shadow, and that sort of thing, and incorporating it into what's hopefully it's no longer his style, and it's no longer the style I used on my previous book. It's a child of those things, and as time goes on, I'll slowly create my own visual language and rely less upon visual languages established before me or something. So.
Well, that's how comics evolve. I think they did why do you like them? They did the same thing. It's they looked back at people that influenced them and they pulled from those creators, but at the same time they're adding their own sensibilities, their own ideas into it, and it becomes not them trying to overshadow them or something like that. It's the idea is to craft something of your own that's unique and different, that's fresh, that feels unique versus being a light version of that person.
Yeah, and I have to tell you that, I completely agree with you, and I have to tell you that one of the most demoralizing feelings is to run across an artist that I cannot identify their influences, and for a brief moment I feel like they have emerged fully formed from the womb of comics ability or something, where if I can't identify where their sources or their inspirations are, it feels like they've completely invented their own language of comics, and that's like, oh my god, I'm such a hack because I didn't do that. Give it a week and you'll pick it out. You'll see where they've gotten this and that and this and that, and they still might be an awesome artist. It doesn't take it away from them. Without exception, so far every artist I've seen has grown as a seed from the soil of previous artists, or they stand on the shoulders of giants so they can see further, or whatever that saying is that I just butchered.
It's funny to hear you say stuff like that, because it is one of the things that I'm really just not, I'm not just blowing smoke your way. Your artwork is very identifiable for me. I mean, even I've watched the evolution, in different books that you've worked on, but I can pick up a book that you do, and I don't need to see the creator credit to know that you've worked on it. You've got your own style. I would argue, and I will say this, and this is really because I think what you've done is so drastically different on Captain Atom. I think with the first issue of Captain Atom, that might be the one exception to that. And I guess what I'm saying is, from a reader standpoint who really enjoys your work, when I look at your artwork, I don't think of other creators when I look at your artwork. I think of you and your style and the way that you present things, which is, I think, what you're going for as a creator. You want something that's unique and identifiable in you. I'm not saying, oh, Freddie's channeling this guy or Freddie's channeling that guy. I think it's cool for me as a reader to connect with you saying you're channeling portions of this person when you say it. I never feel that vibe as a reader when I read your stuff. It always
good.
You stand out that way. You have since you jumped on Robin. That was my first real exposure to you, and where we first started talking about you on the show was when we saw your Robin work, and I was just like, wow, blown away. I know Jim in particular, because Jim became, during that time, it was when we were very early on in the show, and it was during that run that Jim became a major Robin fan. Am I speaking for you here, Jim?
Oh, definitely speaking for me, yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, it's that type of stuff that like really stands out for me as being like, wow, Freddie is, got his own unique style. And I'm really not just blowing smoke your way. So it's interesting to hear you say that you envy other creators when, it looks like you can't identify their style. I can't identify anybody else's style in your work. And I've been reading since I was a little kid. It's more of I see your stuff and I see Freddie Williams' work in there. And so I guess that's the point I'm trying to make there. I'm trying to throw a compliment in a very long-winded way to get there. A compliment your way from a reader's standpoint, at least how it looks for me. Your style is very unique and identifiable to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I take that as a big compliment. When I'm drawing stuff, and this is a conversation I've had with a lot of other artists, but maybe they just don't say it to non-artists or, to the main readership or something, which is there are times that I'm not sure exactly how to render rocks. When I say render, I mean how to add details that make it read as that's a piece of rock instead of a piece of cloth or something. So if you're having trouble, you might, in quotes, crib from another artist or pay homage to that artist or just be influenced or whatever it is. You see how Todd McFarlane might draw capes, let's say, or how Travis Charest might draw. Well, I mean, he draws a lot of stuff really well, but I'm just trying to think of something that's a specific texture, but I'm blanking here. Or how Jim Lee draws noses or whatever it is. And you start to assemble kind of like as a factory in your mind of all those things. And then your own stuff, whatever it is that makes you tick. And then you kind of congeal it all together, and hopefully it makes a cohesive style. Actually, the stark black and white stuff that I've been doing in Captain Atom has been both rewarding and exhausting to me, because it's been hard for me to do that. What I was saying earlier, that I can't look at Frank Miller's stuff for very long, or I can't decipher it. I can't understand how he got there. When I look at like Sin City, I can understand how somebody uses negative space and how somebody uses shadows, but there's something about the way Frank Miller does it that is, it's like cannot compute, and my brain starts to shut down, and I don't know how better to describe it than to say it like that. It's like it's too much. It's hard to describe. It's hard for me to dissect or something. But thank you very much. That's a compliment, and it's something that I'm always curious about, like whether I'm leaning too heavy. There are times in my life that I'm not looking at reference or not looking at other artists at all. And then there's other times that I kind of have to audit myself, which is a really clinical term, but I have to look back and say, have I gone too far afield with how I'm drawing faces, or am I getting too homogenized with how I'm drawing faces? Are they all starting to look too much alike? Or are my backgrounds getting too detailed or not detailed enough, or too much of the same type of rendering? This is all stuff that I usually do in between projects. Since essentially I'm on a project or a book for about a year to a year and a half, that usually seems to be my rhythm or something, that you can kind of assess where you're at and then start to course correct, something like that.
Is the change exciting for you? The fact that because you've worked on some really cool, diverse books. I mean, with very different, to go from a Robin to a Flash to JSA to, I mean, you've done like cool stuff like that Blue Beetle story that you did, which I really enjoyed. But then, now to this Captain Atom, and then now you're going to Green Arrow, which is, another totally different type of character. As a creator, is that something that, do you like making those changes and shifts? Because for us as a reader, I find that exciting, because I'm always looking forward to seeing what you're going to do next. How is that on your end, though?
Most of it is it's a good thing. The only negative comes really in if I'm trying to juggle a couple of projects at the same time. Maybe I can't give the unique flair that I want to be able to. Like, to me, the Blue Beetle stuff that I did, or the one Blue Beetle issue that I did, and the one fill-in issue for, I did like 18 out of 22 pages for an issue of Firestorm, were very much they were essentially the same art sort of approach that I did with Robin, at least to me it is. And so I couldn't give it as much of a spin as I would like. But when I know I'm going to be on a book for a while, I try to put a lot more thought into it so I can make it have its own unique visual language. So it's a challenge, and because I don't get to do it that often, it's one that I feel excited about. If I had to come up with like 5 different styles all at the same time, I'd probably, go crazy. But yeah, and like whenever I'm starting a new book and I essentially approach my editors about it and I say, this is the kind of style I have in mind, so far none of them have ever said no. All of them have said stuff like, I really like it that you're wanting to take a new approach, because most other artists just do the exact same thing no matter what book they're on. So I like that kind of input.
Is there anything else you wanted to say about Captain Atom that we didn't get to?
This is the most collaborative I've ever been on a book, so the two of us have become friends. It's like, it felt very much like a creator-owned type book, where the two of you, it's just kind of the limits of your own imagination and that sort of thing. And anyone who's trying to get into comics probably knows what I'm talking about, like where you're staying up late with your buddy and you're just kicking stuff back and forth. Wouldn't it be cool if we could do this or that? And that was very much how it was with JT and I. Very long conversations that were almost always filled with cool ideas and stuff. I guess I would reiterate that I wish the book went on for longer, but I'm glad that DC gave it the shot, how long that they did give it. A full year plus a 0 issue, that's not too shabby, but we had a lot of other ideas just that we kicked out there that it would have been nice to get to, but it would have taken probably 2 or 3 more story arcs for it to pay off the way we wanted it to. So anyway, that's pretty much it. Thank you for everyone for giving it a shot, and for DC for giving it a run to try to get some momentum.
Queen put it best, man. Just 1 year of love is better than a lifetime alone.
Freddie, as always, I want to thank you for your time on the show. This is exactly why we love having you on, because it's really just, having a great friend and a great guest joining us again. Is there anything promotional-wise, website-wise, you want to shout out to everybody, or where they can find out more information about you?
Yes. My website is freddieart.com. My Twitter handle is @freddieart. And my Facebook, I think, is just Freddie Williams. Freddie Williams II. But if you go to my website, freddieart.com, there's links to both of those from my website and also to my YouTube. Yeah, check that out. I mean, I'm on Twitter almost every day. Recently, I've been a little occupied with the crazy deadline stuff, but generally, I'll tweeting throughout the day, I guess is what I'm trying to say. That's the most easy and social interaction that I have. And then aside from that, I occasionally do a YouTube video and that sort of stuff.
And I'll have links to that in the show notes. So, you guys,
awesome.
Thank you as always. We love having you on the show. It's always a great discussion, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It doesn't seem like you guys mind it, but I apologize every time I look at the time and see that we've been on for a couple of hours. It doesn't seem like that, but time always flies whenever I'm chatting with you guys. So thanks for having me on.
This is a normal show for us. That's one of the reasons why we like having you on. It's like business as usual.
Holy caffeine!
Hey everyone, I'm X from Alt3red Egos, and I'm trying to become less of a man. I know it sounds a little strange. Currently, I stand 5 feet 6 inches tall and weigh a whopping 319 pounds. I own that. I'm committed to losing weight, but I need a little extra motivation. And since money is really good at that, I contacted fellow podcaster Daryl Taylor of DC Noise and the Taylor Network to place a small wager. For $50, we're going to see who can lose the biggest percentage of body weight. But why just us? Why not open it up to everyone? So here it is. On July 12th, we're going to have an official weigh-in to see who can lose the biggest percentage of body weight in 3 months. On October 12th at the New York Comic Con, we'll have our final weigh-in, and the winner will present a donation to the Hero Initiative in the name of their podcast. Now, the Hero Initiative, if you don't know, is a great charitable organization that helps raise financial assistance for past comic creators who are just in need of a little bit of help. So check them out at www.heroinitiative.org. Fans can also decide to take part and represent their favorite show as well. So, if you want in, there are several ways to sign up. By email, voicemail, at our forum, the Facebook event. But for now, we're asking everyone to go to our website at www.alt3redegos.com. That's ALT3, REDEGOS.com. That way we can coordinate so that everybody has the same information and knows exactly what's going to happen as far as getting in on the challenge. And if you do want to take part in the weight loss challenge, we need to hear from you by July 10th. After that, you won't be able to take part in the main weight loss goal, but you can always make donations. I'll be adding information about our Razoo page, including the link for straight donations at that point for everyone that has all of the guilt but none of the willpower. Just kidding. Obviously, every little bit helps. We'll have straight donations as well as per pound amounts for our combatants to get a little extra motivation as well. I look forward to becoming less of a man with everyone. And now, I return you to your regularly scheduled podcast. Take it away, fellas.
As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I think this Hero Initiative program that they're doing is amazing. And I'm a big fan of the Hero Initiative. We've supported it over the years on our own podcast. It's something, if you haven't had a chance to support the Hero Initiative, it's really helping yesterday's creators who are in need of help and support today. I think it's a great program, and it's something that really, this is a cool opportunity to do something fun, something healthy for yourself if you want to participate in the program. One way or another, though, even if you're not going to participate in the weight loss challenge, please consider donating to the Hero Initiative. It's a wonderful website. It's heroinitiative.org. You want to go and you want to make sure you're supporting the Hero Initiative because it's something for us if we are fans of this medium because yesterday's creators paved paths for this. So please consider supporting the Hero Initiative. Sponsoring this episode, once again, is DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. As mentioned at the beginning of the show, this is the time of the month. It's going to be coming up this week. You're going to want to check and see the new and amazing deals that DCB Service is offering. They offer stuff from 35 to 40, all the way up to 75% off. Pre-orders. This is a great opportunity just to get amazing deals from DCBService.com. Remember, they're a Comixology digital partner. Every dollar you spend, you can earn 5% of as credit at DCBService.com towards your orders. It's a great opportunity to earn extra money for dollars you're already spending digitally. So please consider doing that over at DCBService.com as well. Hopefully in this episode, if you haven't checked out any of Freddie E. Williams' II work before, this is a great opportunity for you to do this. Go over to InStockTrades.com. Check out some of the trade paperback collections. If you're a fan of Robin, his Robin work was stellar. Great work on The Flash. Cool work over on JSA All-Stars. I'm a big JSA fan. I really loved his work. I do remember the first trade paperback that he did on JSA All-Stars, he went back through and redid some of the artwork on that one. So that trade paperback, even if you were a fan and collecting JSA All-Stars at the time, it's worth collecting that first trade because Freddie actually did some new material in there, did some new additions to the artwork in there. It's cool. I went back through and compared my single issues to the work that he did. It's really cool to see what he did. It's kind of the director's cut, so to speak, of JSA All-Stars. And I'm a big fan of that he had an opportunity to do that for the trade, because there were some things that he really wanted to soup up. We did that in a previous episode of the show, where he said that, hey, I did this in the trade because DC gave me a chance to do it, and it was a cool chance for me to do some things that I just didn't have time for when we were working on the monthly title. So I thought that was kind of neat. So I want to encourage you to check that out over at InStockTrades.com. I want to once again give a nice thank you to Freddie E. Williams II for coming on the show and being such a great guest and giving us some great opportunities to answer all of our questions about his work on Captain Atom and just in comics in general. He's a terrific guest, and he gives us a ton of his time, and we really, really appreciate it. I also want to thank everyone for their patience on the release of this episode. We had to record a little later than Jim and I were originally intending. Jim had some family come in from out of town, and it put the scheduling for the show into kind of a crazy spot, and Jim's flexibility always of trying to fit in showtime is greatly appreciated. Freddie was terrific enough, too, to be flexible and work out a schedule that we were all happy with to get this episode recorded. Next week, I'm going to be doing a Green Lantern show. It's going to be all Green Lantern, and I'll be joined by longtime friend of the show, Myron Rumsey. So I will see you next week.
Bye.
Flying through space and time, 1,000 different lifetimes. Faded for love and flaws and incredibly clear sightlines. Swinging your mace around, such a practical outlook. Helping the JSA and occasionally supporting your own book. Hawkman, Hawkman, eagle eyes can't see. Hawkman, your plan and what you do to me. Hawkman. The villains are closing in, be they Thanin Guard or Egyptian. Working so hard to thwart you and Hawkgirl's mission. The odds are not on your side, and danger seems to stack up. Things would be so much easier if you would just call for backup. Hawkman, Hawkman, eagle eyes can't see your plan and what you do to me. Hawkman, Hawkman, eagle eyes can't see.